Welcome back to another week. This week I'm doing something a little bit different. I haven't done this on this channel before. You may have remembered a couple of weeks ago I brought home a taller chest of drawers that had been in my family, and I had refinished it in a deep chocolatey brown. I ended up keeping that piece, and now it lives in my bedroom. It just was not matching the current vintage furniture that I had in there previously. So I wanted to challenge myself and do a custom build of a longer dresser that would match that taller dresser and just go with that style, be the same color tone, be the same wood species, and just look like they live cohesively in the same room. So with that idea in mind, I did take inspiration from that taller piece and replicated a few of the design features of it so that the two pieces could mesh together and play nicely within the same space. Of course, the original tall dresser has lots and lots of age history behind it, so I know that I'm not going to completely achieve the same look. I just wanted to complement it. I knew that I wanted to do a 6-drawer dresser. This one is 60 inches long, so 5 feet, and it's a little bit taller. This one stands 36 inches off the ground, and by doing this, I was able to create really big and deep drawers. So with this in mind, I got my pencil and paper and I started drawing up the plans for it. And I figured while I was constructing and building this, I might as well build 2 of them. So that's exactly what I did. Follow along with me this week as I show you the process of how I took this just from a pile of plywood to a beautiful matching dresser to my other piece that I currently have living in my space. The first step for me, anytime I'm building anything custom, I like to draw it out on grid paper. There's all sorts of programs out there that can help achieve this for you. I like to be very hands-on, so I do it the old-fashioned way and draw something out. This isn't perfectly to scale, it's just a rough estimation. And by doing this, it allows me to not only design a piece, but also map out the dimensions of the different components of this dresser and fit it together and see what would be the best use of my 4x8 sheets of plywood and have as little waste as possible. After doing that, I grabbed my tape and my saws and I went to work cutting down these large pieces of plywood into the different sections that will make up this dresser. I started by cutting the 2 tops down. Since I am doing 2 dressers, I was able to do it in a way that made the most sense for all of the components for both of the dressers at the same time. I will go over my material list at the end to show you what I ended up using and how much roughly it cost me. Whenever I'm cutting my plywood, I like to keep 2 separate piles and keep a note of which piece goes where. I don't want to mix up my scrap or leftover boards with a board that I actually have cut and already allocated for a piece on the dresser. Sometimes I'll even write on the board that I just cut what component it is, say a top or a side, a drawer face, things like that. My table saw is always going to be more accurate than my track saw, so whenever I can, I do like to make some of the cuts using my table saw or my miter saw. In this case, I am cutting down the 4 sides for the 2 dressers, and by using my table saw, I can make sure that they are all identical sizes, and I'm not going to have to worry about them being off by, say, like a 1/16 of an inch, and it might cause my cabinet to be a little wonky or not perfectly square. I always go over all of my measurements and check my math twice. You can't undo a cut, obviously, but sometimes mistakes happen and you just have to pivot and get creative. Luckily, in this situation, I was able to keep all my cuts straight and everything worked out perfectly. So I know that I have enough material in my scrap leftover piece of plywood to cut out all of the drawer faces. However, I do want to go ahead and build the body of the dresser first. That way I know that I have a perfect measurement for each one of those drawer faces in case anything changes by 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch. That way I have a nice tight fit, especially because I'm expecting these drawers to be inset and flush with the frame. So I have less wiggle room and I have to be that much more precise. I have a total of 8 of these 2x2 by 3 foot pieces of lumber, and I do want to cut them down. I want the height of these dressers overall to be 36 inches, which these pieces are, but I have to keep in mind the thickness of my wooden top. I'm going to be using 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood to build the top, so I'm going to have to subtract a total of 1.5 inches from each one of these legs, so they'll end up being 34.5 inches each. So I'm gonna chop each one of them down, making sure that I get the measurement perfectly equal among all 8 of them. I find it so helpful to use a heat gun and just a razor blade to remove these stickers. If you don't get all that adhesive up, it can affect the stain and how the stain sticks to this. So it's so important to either get all the adhesive up using heat and or sanding, usually a combination of the two. Taking my side pieces as well as all 8 of my legs, I am going to start to get ready to assemble them. So I will be assembling these sides, affixing them to the legs, just like so. And I'm going to be doing that with pocket holes. So I will put pocket holes going into the sides of this plywood, and it will attach the legs to it to become all one piece. And then I can also go ahead and put pocket holes on the top of these side panels, and that's what's going to attach the top of the dresser to the side. I like to go ahead and drill in my pocket holes before I sand, because sometimes there is a little bit of rough tear out, and it's just nice to sand that tear out. Even though this is all going to be on the inside of the piece, it just makes it a little bit more finished. Trust me when I say it is so much easier to sand and smooth out all of the different pieces of the dresser before it's attached together. I can always go back and do just a gentle smooth sand once everything is together, but for a nice thorough sanding, I like to do it when it's all apart. Now for those side panels. I'm going to lay out my two legs and use just a 1/8 of an inch backer board underneath to create a little bit of a lip so that that side panel is not totally flush with those 2x2s that I used for the legs. Everything is going to be joined together using wood glue and the pocket holes. This will create a nice strong bond and will be plenty durable to make sure that this dresser stays together and is a nice, sturdy, solid piece. I find clamps are so useful when it comes to screwing together pocket holes. Sometimes they can shift around, especially if you have wood glue on those edges. It just slips around a little bit more. Just grab a set of clamps and it really helps you out. My next order of action was to rip down some long boards into 2-inch strips that will stretch along the horizontal lines of the dresser on both the top and the bottom, on the front and the back. These are what I'm going to use to actually put that box together now that I have the two side panels for each dresser completed. Because these pieces were cut using plywood, I do want to go ahead and edge band any of the exposed edges. This is going to clean up the piece and really make it look like a piece of solid wood. I am using oak edge banding because I'm using oak plywood. That way it looks and stains all the same when it's all said and done. I prefer iron-on edge banding. This is the most common form that you will find out there. Just grab an iron, usually one that you're not planning on using on clothes afterwards, heat it up to the hottest setting, and carefully run it across that edge banded side. It will burn if you leave it on there too long, but if you don't leave it on long enough, the glue will not fully melt and you might have some failing edges. So just test it out. It can take a little bit of finesse, but you can always reheat it if you need to melt that glue back down again. One of these edge trimmers specifically for edge banding is a lifesaver. I have used a razor blade before, but you run the risk of gouging into that plywood and it's not nearly as fast. Again, wood glue is going to be my friend in this situation. I am going to go ahead and apply a liberal amount of wood glue and then use pocket holes to hold everything together and really allow that wood glue to cure. With the front side done, I can flip it over very carefully and attach the two pieces that are going to go along the back side as well. I have now got the first dresser body flipped on to its top, so it's upside down. You can see the feet are up in the air. This will be the front side, and I wanted to pre-cut and measure since I'm doing kind of a tiered top on this, so it makes it look like the top is actually 2 full pieces. It's just gonna be 1 full piece and then some trim board around the edge. But I wanted to make sure everything was gonna fit perfectly. And since I'm wanting to replicate that other dresser that I refinished earlier, I am going to cut some 45-degree angles right at the top right here, but I wanted to dry fit everything before I cut them because once I cut them, there's no putting them back. So I think I'm all in the clear. I'm gonna cut them and then I can work on edge banding the top and then getting that top affixed to the actual body. Now that the 2 dresser bodies have been assembled and completed, I was running out of space in my shop, so I wanted to pivot and go back to the pieces of plywood that I had set aside specifically to create the 6 drawer boxes in each piece. I ripped that plywood down to the dimensions that I needed so I could free up some room. The next step in assembling this is I want to install the vertical divide that will divide this dresser in two, and it's gonna have to go all the way across because it's gonna be something that I'm gonna have to use to attach my drawer glides to. So in order to do that, I think the easiest solution will be to take the top back off. It's just screwed on, I did not glue it. So that will be easy enough. And then I can screw down through the top supports as well as up through the bottom supports to affix that center divide across the entire front to back area. The next step in the process is to actually cut and install that backer board. With a piece as large as this is, a backer board will really help to make it nice and sturdy and sure up everything. It also is a great opportunity to make sure that your piece is nice and square. If it's not square, it will be pretty apparent when you go to install the backer board. This will help hold everything in place and really make sure you have a nice level surface in order to install the different pieces like the drawer boxes and glides. It's time to start cutting the 12 drawer faces. I want to make sure that my table saw is set to the same exact dimensions so that they're all the same size. I took a lot of care to make sure all of the spaces where the drawers are going to go in the body of the dresser are all equal distance from each other. So all these drawer faces could go technically in either one of the slots that the drawers are going to go at the end of it. Just like everything else, they will get edge banded if they have a exposed edge. This can be a pretty tedious process, but it's well worth the effort for that nice finished product at the end of the day. You will notice even after cutting away that edge banding, it's pretty common to have a little bit of that glue spill out on the edges. So it's so important to sand everything down because it will stain differently. And lastly is to just fill in any little imperfections like this knot in the wood. I found that these next few steps, it was easiest to have the dresser on its side. I want to go ahead and install just the last couple of little trim pieces that are going to go in between those drawer faces. These are not structural by any means. It's more for appearance than anything else. I am going to glue them and pocket hole them in place, making sure that they are equal distance away from each other and that all of my drawer openings are exactly the same size as I mentioned before. A nice tight fit makes things so much easier. I don't want it too big, but I want it to fit snugly. These drawer tracks do need to sit flush to the outside edge of the legs. And in order to do that, I am actually going to attach these scrap pieces of plywood on the inset panels themselves, since they were a different dimension than the wood of the legs. Because my drawer tracks are going to sit on this, I do want to make sure that they are evenly spaced across this dresser. It'll just make drilling in those drawer tracks at the end of the day that much easier. All that I simply need to do in order to hold them in place is apply a liberal amount of wood glue and tack them in place with some nails while that wood glue dries. Pivoting back to the materials that I will be using to construct those drawer boxes, I am running each one of those sides through my table saw with the blade lowered down to about half of the thickness of this 3/4 inch plywood. There are a total of 12 drawers with 4 sides, and I'm running this through the table saw twice to create a large enough gap for my drawer bottom to sit. This means I had to run these through 96 times total. It's very time consuming, it's very dusty, it's loud, but in the end you have a really sturdy drawer box. I will be holding these boxes together using pocket hole screws on both the front edge and the back edge. By doing it on the front and the back, this makes sure that those pocket holes are hidden. In the front, it is covered by that drawer face, and in the back, nobody ever sees because you're never looking at the back side of the drawer box, even when it's pulled out. Drawer boxes always take a really long time to construct. That's why I always make sure to take into consideration not only the cost of the added materials needed for additional drawers, but also the time. Everything gets a nice smooth sand. I don't want any splintery edges, and I want to round over that top edge so that it's as clean as possible. It can be a little tricky to attach these drawer boxes together, but with enough patience and going slowly with it, it's not too bad. I go ahead and attach the 2 sides to the front board, and that allows me to be able to slide in the drawer box bottom. Sliding this in will create a lot of rigidity and help me to hold everything together while I attach that last side. And that's it. This drawer box is all complete. Since I am going to finish these to match the previous dresser that I did recently, I do want to go ahead and put more of an undercoat on these. I think what really builds up that nice warm chocolatey color is that toned top coat that I spray at the end. This is just going to get some color on them initially. Previously, I did go with an oil base. This time I am going to go with a water-based because the dry time is significantly less. I would like to be able to stain these and top coat them in the same day. Whereas if I did use an oil-based, I would have to wait at least 24 hours before top coating them, maybe even a little bit more because it's gotten a little bit more chilly where I am right now, and weather does play a factor in that. So I do just have a special walnut color water-based stain. I'm gonna brush it on. Since it is water-based, I'm gonna brush it very liberally and then wipe it back immediately with a paper towel and just start to get as much product and color on these as I can.
The coffee's ready if you'll have some. Breakfast should be finished soon. The paper called for sun tomorrow. It looks like rain the whole day through. Morning left us both defeated. The mailman left another bill. The hallway closet's overflowing with all those shoes too big to fill.
After that initial coat of water-based stain has fully dried down and cured, I am going to go in with another water-based product. This one is a satin top coat, and I am going to spray this through my sprayer. It creates such a flawless finish when it is sprayed. I really want to seal in and create a little bit of a coating over that stain before I go ahead and create my quote-unquote toner color that's going to go over the entire surface. I am only going to do one coat of this and spray it on liberally, but not worry too much about the protection that this is going to provide because I am going to be spraying so many additional coats of a tinted top coat.
What's that song we used to sing? What's that dance we used to do? Is this house quiet or just empty? Do you hear the silence as loud as I
With those steps completed, now comes the part that's really going to transform and change the look of this piece. I've only ever done this once before, but I really did like the way it came out. I completely cleaned out my entire spray system and added just a little bit of this really dark, moody brown color as, again, similar to a toner, a tint, to my water-based top coat. Now keep in mind, I am making sure to add only water-based products together to achieve this, and that's why I can spray it through my system just fine. My goal with this is to spray it in very even strokes and let the additional coats be what builds up the color and the depth. Overall, I sprayed a total of 3 coats of this, not including the first coat of just plain clear top coat, and I sanded very gently in between each coat. The first coat can look a little bit patchy in my opinion, but the subsequent coats really do bring up that color, and you will see as I go that second and third coat really do richen up and deepen the color tone of this. I think you could absolutely play around with different colors and see how this product works on different tones. I just went with the darkest brown that I have in my collection, but you could probably go with a lighter tan color and possibly even create a completely different direction, a completely different look. It's fun to try out different processes and just play around with things and see how they work. In the end, I'm very pleased with how this came out. I think this process worked really well on oak because it is such a strong grain pattern. That stain really does cling in and get into those areas of grain that make it look really, really busy. And this toned top coat really does help to unify the piece and bring those tones together so that the grain pattern is still there, still visible, but not quite so in your face. I think that is one of the characteristics that can turn a lot of people off from oak. I've had multiple clients turn down a piece because they just don't like the oak pattern, and I completely understand. To each his own. I do like oak, but this would be a good solution to just bring it down a notch while still remaining true and allowing some of that pretty characteristic to still shine through. I picked up some black metal ball bearing soft close drawer glides, and it's time to install them in the cavities of these dressers. Because I am doing inset drawers, I do want to make sure to use a spacer block to make sure that I'm installing these at the proper depth. And I do find it useful to use a small drill bit and drill a little small pilot hole so that it's easier to screw that screw in. These screws are so tiny, and it's one of those tasks that always feels like you need about 5 more hands than you actually have. I wanted to make sure that all of these drawer tracks were level, so I got that first screw in and then made sure to level everything else. I don't want an uneven drawer track that might cause the drawer to bind and not open smoothly. I am going to line the drawer boxes with the same pattern from the previous dresser. I think it's really pretty. It gives almost an antique look, and the little subtle pop of pink roses is just so pretty and feminine. This will also help to protect the bottom of these drawers from future use and make sure that they last as long as possible. I score it with a nice and sharp razor blade and cut away the excess. And once that's done, you have a really pretty product. I find it easy enough to go ahead and install the tracks to the bottom of the drawer boxes. I make the drawer boxes smaller than the actual drawer opening so that I do have some wiggle room in the placement of the actual boxes themselves. Sliding it home is always a little nerve-wracking to make sure that I cut everything exactly the right dimensions and everything slides as smoothly as possible. In order to install the drawer faces, I am going to do some very small pilot holes where the actual hardware would go, and I'm going to use those small little holes to actually drive a screw through to hold the drawer face in place while I can affix it from the back. I'm not looking to go all the way through this material with these first pilot holes, just enough to mar the surface so I can see where I need to put my screw in. Using a spacer block on the bottom to make sure all of my edges are roughly the same size, I'm going to hold it in place and really firmly press while driving those screws in. Because I'm going through the future hardware holes, I don't have to worry about it marring it up and creating unnecessary holes in the front. This holds everything in place so that I can use 4 wood screws and affix it from the back. I like to use a scrap block of wood while drilling through thick material like this. This will prevent a little bit of the tear out from the back of the drill into the drawer box itself. And with those holes drilled, I can go ahead and finish installing the hardware. And with everything all wrapped up, before I go ahead and share the stage pictures of the final look on these beautiful dressers, I did want to talk about the cost. Like I promised before, I'm not always great about keeping track of the cost of a custom build. There's multiple factors that go into that. A lot of times I do have extra supplies, extra materials already in my shop. It's not uncommon for me to have scrap plywood, backer board, of course, paints, stains, top coats, all of those kind of things. So I don't necessarily always calculate that out. This particular time, I did want to keep a running tally because it has been requested. So all in, the 2 dressers, both of them built, completely finished out, cost me roughly about $400 a piece. This is pretty pricey, especially when you consider the amount of time that it took. These dressers took me, I want to say like 5 full days to assemble and completely finish. Building pieces from scratch always takes significantly longer than refinishing a piece. I don't mind doing it every once in a while, but I definitely, with the way I work and my prices and all that, could not afford to only build furniture. I build pretty beginner to intermediary level pieces. I don't have the space, I don't have the tools for really intricate custom solid wood pieces of furniture that would bring in thousands of dollars. I try to keep things pretty affordable whenever I build them. I wanted a piece for myself, so it only made sense to build 2. And this does play a factor in the cost. By building 2, I get to share the materials between the 2, so it does bring the cost down a little bit, not to mention it splits the time. Of course, it took me more time because I was building 2 instead of just 1, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. If I were building 2 separate dressers a week apart from each other and not at the same time, it would take me significantly more than building 2 at the same time. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this video and this process. It took a little bit longer than I was expecting. It always does. I'm terrible about estimating timelines and stuff like that. I do plan on actually building a set of nightstands. I don't know if there'll be an exact duplicate to this, but my husband and I want a different set of nightstands for our bedroom, and by building them myself, I can customize the size, the number of drawers, and different functional elements of them themselves. Anyway, let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoy the time lapse of the completed pictures, videos, and stage pieces. Thank you so much for watching.